Day 8 represents, so it's day 7, I should say day 7 and 8. Because remember, he says there's a Sabbath rest for God's people. There's 2 days of rest. So that's why there's 2 days of Sukkot. And then day 8 is type of Hanukkah, and then day 9 is the Simchat Torah. All things are fulfilled. And so I'm just pointing this out because the summation of this study is to let you be aware that the time frame that we're in is 2019, and we have a 2023 end date potentially, which means we have 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. We got 5 years. Did the Jews know when Jesus was going to come before? They knew within a year and a half. They should have known within, doing the math here, but they would have been off by a year and a half, a year and 8 months, excuse me. They'd have been off. All they got to do is do the math there. They'd been like, wait, 43 years, so wait a second. By the time he's cut off you mean die. So therefore he'd be start his ministry around 30, I would think. They don't know that for certain, but they would think, you know. They don't know, right? But the reality is they had a real good idea. And by just following the timeline, just like what Herod did, when the wise men came to, remember there wasn't just 3 of them, doesn't say that, they had 3 gifts. But when they came and said, we followed the star from the east, he's going, wait. How long have you been following the star for? Okay, so he's born in the womb for 9 months. He's out. You've been following him for about a year. So he's at least over a year and a half, under 2. All kids 2 and under, kill them all. Herod's not stupid. That's why he said, any child 2 years and under, kill them all, right? Well, at the same time, he didn't know the exact age of Jesus. And that's the reason why they're the wise guys. They didn't know either, right? They didn't know. So here you have here the same thing happening. You have 43 years, but you didn't know for certain when he would begin his ministry. You got to try to figure this out. So we don't know the exact time, but we do have a really good indication of the frame of time, which is why Jesus says, you know the movement of the clouds and the seasons, and yet you don't know when the Son of Man would come. So we're supposed to know the rough idea. I'm not date setting. I'm not month setting. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that before things will start to go down, before the peace treaty is signed, that you will have the Feast of Trumpets being fulfilled when the shofar will blow. From the God standpoint, he'll take that first wave of the 100 fruit people out, but that's it. And then after that, there'll be a 60 fruit yield later on, and then 30 after that, and then the midpoint happens, and there's only the Semitic that are here because it gets real ugly real fast. But the reality is, before all that happens, before the Yom Kippur happens, there's going to be already these gleanings that are going on right now. There's always a remnant that are poor and strangers hearing about the kingdom truth being sown. But the reality is that you have all this different aspect of things where you have now a time frame that's similar to what they had, right? They did the math. They could go, okay, 23 years. That puts me about, so they would look forward in their timeline. If they added the math up, that would have put them, this would have put them at AD 36. They'd have been 2 years off, right? You think about it, right? They'd have been 2 years off, and they would have been like, okay, they would have known. So if you were a Jewish person, that means if you look 6 years, if you are thinking he begins his ministry at least at 30, because they knew a priest goes from 20 years of age to 30 before he's on his own. So they would think 30, plus the Joseph type. So I would think they would know the 30 piece. So they would go 6 years back, which would put them at AD 28, 2 years before Jesus comes on the scene. They should have been already looking. So even if God did do this on purpose, for their purpose of looking 2 years before he came, they would go, wait a second, you know? They should have figured this out. They should have been, okay, if he's 30 when he starts, let's figure this out, you know? So they may have thought he ministers for 6 years, according to their math. But the point is, when they went to look in, what did they see? Nothing. They didn't see nothing. They didn't see a reason possibly to continue to be vigilant. They didn't see a purpose and a cause that goes beyond what the math told them, and they went, okay, I guess that was off, you know? Think about it. If you were looking and you come to see that there's nothing coming to fruition, what would you think? Would you think, you know, what's going on there? You know, it's just interesting how when you get to the similarities between, they were given a number timeline, we're given a number timeline. They're off by 2 years from what we see, and we got 5 years that we're off either way. We don't know. If they're looking, And they look to this time frame. If they go 6 years back at AD 30, thinking he began his ministry, that would put them at AD 28 when Jesus wasn't even on the scene yet. But if they were paying attention, what would they have seen? Think about it. What would they have seen? They would have heard stories about, they would have remembered about this murdering of kids. They'd have remembered about these wise men coming from afar. They'd remember the stories about a star that happened just a little bit ago, maybe just in their lifetime. They would have remembered about how there was the stories about a young boy at 12 years old going to the Sanhedrin. Think about that. Because if they're thinking that he had to be 30 when he started, that means AD 38, that would have been just about 12, 15 years before that he'd been doing this correction of the teachers in the synagogue. So they should have remembered. There were little things they should have remembered. So what do we have like that to remind us that's been years ago? Oh, I don't know, the Six-Day War, Israel becoming a state, Israel becoming independent. We have indicators as well. Israel's capital of the U.S. Embassy, our capital of the U.S. Embassy being moved to Jerusalem, does that make a difference in prophecy, what we did as USA? No, but it does make a difference in how the world sees Israel's input with the largest superpower being associated with it, so it brings more attention to an attack, which brings more probability to the Dome of the Rock being destroyed.
And plus this dedication of the altar this Hanukkah.
Dedication of the altar this Hanukkah. Yeah, there's a lot. That's right. There's a lot of things going on that you could see that lead to potential things that could let us know that even though we don't see anything right now per se of his, but just like they didn't see anything right now, they could look in the time frame and go, okay, I don't see anything right now, but something is going to happen in my lifetime. I just don't know when. Now, that's the very least they should have done, right? I would agree. Think about it. If you were back then and you were given this timeline, and if you did the timeline, it brought you to AD 36, and you went back 6 years before that and looked around among your landscape of Israel, it had been AD 38 real time. But you would have, and when Jesus would have been there, and you would have not seen anything happening as far as that was the indicators, the Messiah is here. But if you would have taken more of a stock in being still, taking more reflection, you'd have remembered these other stories I was telling about just recently, right? You'd have seen that. So the point of this is, know what time we're in, understand you can't count on man's calendar, whether it's Gentile or Jew. Know that God has a reason and purpose behind his 70 weeks, and he gave that purpose for a future for Israel, but it starts with a focus on Christ to come first, which leads to the numbers issue that you're not going to know the exact year. You're just not going to know it. But he's going to give you close enough that where you're not going to see an exact reason that this would be the year, but he's going to set it up to where you can have retrospect and you can have a scale of understanding that we are closer than we've ever been, and it's going to happen in our lifetime. Come on. How could you not believe that? How could they look at what they know in numbers and say, okay, I don't see anything now, it's not going to happen now. I could see that. But they could not say it won't happen in our lifetime if these guys were of middle age or something like that. Come on. They have to have known that, right? And so is that the reason why and Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea later would come to faith? Maybe so. But later on, again, we see Jesus then, as we talked about, and then lastly, to sum up, if he has already fulfilled the feast days on their month in which they were originally ordained, why would he not then ordain the future ones on those same months? And therefore, the Feast of Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah, is the blowing of the trumpet, and again, 100 times, which is a type of that first fruit, wave 1, which means that we know when the 7-year peace treaty will happen, we know when the wave's going to happen is in September. I just don't know what year. I don't know that.
I've heard that the peace treaty will be signed on Yom Kippur, year 1, and then the second coming, the Yom Kippur, year 7.
Oh,
The tribulation goes from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur.
And you have also, for example, Jesus, when he came in John 1, he came to dwell amongst his people, John 1:14, and he Sukkoted, the word Sukkot. So he was born, people say he was born in April. No, he's born or December. They say April or December, but he's actually September. He was born in Sukkot because he fulfilled the feast of Sukkot. Correct. Correct. That's 9 months, exactly right. He was conceived in Hanukkah, born in Sukkot. And all this falls in line with everything of his birth and fulfillments have to do of his coming of the feast days happen in the month of the feast day. He's not going to Sukkot amongst his people and be born in Passover. That makes no sense. And some people actually believe this, by the way. There's some Jewish people that believe, I'm going to put this out there, they believe that this is going to sound, I mean, you hear this, it's going to sound hilarious to me. Now remember, I just said to you, I'm admitting to you that I do not know the actual days and years. No one knows the actual year because of the God himself changing the celestial stars and the rotation of the earth. God himself showing that man, Gentile and Jew, added to the calendar. And so therefore, you cannot sit here and tell me you know, so stop lying. But however, there are Jewish people that say, Jesus was born in the Passover, because they make this fallacious comment and they say, oh, did you know that only lambs are brought out to mating season, and the only time that they give birth, the only time that lambs give birth is April? Come on, man. Really? Really? The only time in the entire month that lambs give birth is April. That's the only month. Really, that's it. Just 1 month. Come on, man. That is insane. You're going to tell me that so before there was humans that were herding sheep, when God first put sheep on the planet, before there was enough of us humans to herd them, they were going, I'm waiting on you to give us to mate. Come on, man. Come on. What you talking about? That is insanity to sit here and tell me that you think lambs only have relations so that they can always constitute their birthing in April. That's what some Jewish teachers have taught this. They teach that the lambs only give birth in April, and therefore, since the lambs only are born in April, therefore Christ is the lamb, he was born in April. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about, dude? So they teach this, but that makes no sense, because then he'd be fulfilling Sukkot in Passover month, which makes no sense. He's dwelling amongst his people. He's alive. He's born in Sukkot. Come on. Yes.
First of all, Vicki said, I have my family Christmas party this afternoon and must go now to finish getting food started.
Yep.
Love you all.
Yep. So we're gonna end up now where it's pretty much yes.
And Tracy said, future, PROVESZ, past.
Future what? Passover?
Proves. Sorry.
Jeez, man. So in this sense, we got everything here that we're looking at from a future standpoint of what's going to be happening, and it just gives us the idea of scale of where we are and what is next to happen for us, and that's all we're looking at. So the reason for the lesson today was to look at a timeline, look at a scale of things. The middle was to give us a retrospect, take a step back, and remember what it's all about. Don't get so caught up in the days. Don't get so caught up in the 5 years left thing. Remember the purpose behind when God first put forth this timeline. When he first put it forth, to come it all to an end. What was the purpose? To make Israel no longer have idolatry against him as a people. To make sure he brought out a remnant of people. And to make sure that he makes it known that the entrance into the day 7 or into day 8 inheritance. But it all goes back to making an end of sins, reconciling, and putting an end to iniquity, and bringing in righteousness. That's the purpose behind all this. Not to set a date and be excited. Because if you're excited about a date, but you're not putting an end to your sins, you're not focused on being reconciled to God, you're not focused on cleaning up your iniquities in your life, and I got issues with this myself, I'm just telling you. Because how are you going to have eternal righteousness if you don't focus on what it is that you need to get cleaned up before he comes and does what he does? That's the whole person. The whole reason he's behind this timeline is to let us know he's given us a frame from which there's only so much time in which you better get these things in your head. That's why he's doing this. He's putting an end of it. It's like a test. Like he's telling you what's on the test, okay? Test is tomorrow, but this is what's going to be tested on. You go, test is tomorrow. I'm not going to study, though. He's like, why wouldn't you study? I just told you it's going to be on the test. And you're excited about the test itself because it means end of the school year. And he's like, no. Don't you want to pass the test? I just want to take it. The school year's over. Don't you want to pass the test? And that's how you pass. So that's what this is about. So let's close in prayer and we'll reconvene. So Father, thank you for this day, for the opportunity we have just to be your pastor, our guide, our teacher, and our counselor. We just thank you for teaching, guiding, directing, and helping us to see the error of men, the shortcomings that we all have as human beings and as mankind. And we look to you to guide us and teach us and direct us. Thank you for this timeline you've given us, an understanding of relevance to where we are today, but also to excite us about what is in the future left ahead. And we just continue to thank you and praise you for who you are and what you do. And we just ask you to be with us throughout the week, bring us back together safely. In Jesus' name, amen. We're not going to do the communion today. We're going to do it next Sunday because we're absent some people because of the holiday trip.